has left the EU. What does that mean from a VAT recovery perspective? Sorry. And then hand over to Gabrielle to really talk about the retrade solution. What does that mean for you? And I think a lot of you here today are very interested in understanding what does that mean for your supply chain? What are the different remedies? What are the different pitfalls and how you can solve that problem? So just very briefly touching on VAT reclaim. Essentially what VAT reclaim means is that if I'm here in the UK and I'm traveling along to, let's say, the France, Germany, anywhere else, I'm able to recover that VAT that's spent for business purposes. And very kindly, should I say, or maybe not, of the EU, the encouragement of international transactions, inter-border transactions, to allow for businesses to conduct activities across the different borders, and to really reduce the red tape, to reduce the financial consequences, the financial pitfalls. And one of those methods was done by VAT recovery. So normally you and I, we're traveling, we're going to a hotel as individuals, we sit in that hotel, we pay the bill, we pay the VAT, and we move on. And unfortunately, that's what we're paying in anywhere between 18% all the way up to 27%, average 20% across the EU, obviously 20% here in the UK prior to some of the COVID reductions. But that is an extra cost that businesses have to face. And it makes cost of doing business even higher. So the EU's come together and had been done for the last 15, 20 years, and really allows businesses to recover that VAT. So it's a mechanism for businesses to recover the VAT that's spent, reducing the costs and allowing them a sort of frictionless let's say, a travel and supply chain element between the different countries to reduce that cost. Ultimately, though, businesses who don't do this, who don't take advantage of that opportunity to recover, they lose out on that money and it becomes a sunk cost, which of course is an extra expense for those businesses. And those benefits really mean increasing your cash flow, removing that unnecessary expense that businesses currently face. Why should businesses who want to trade between one country and another, large international supply chains, large international movements of people, why should they lose out on money? Remember that VAT is that expense right that you and I pay at the end. So it's something that really shouldn't be incurred by the business, and that's the opportunity that a VAT recovery solution such as ourselves are able to do. And over 60 countries around the world offer this opportunity, mostly within the EU and Europe, but there are within the APAC regions. Taiwan is an example as well, Australia and New Zealand, but mostly in the EU, and of course here in the UK. And as I said, 27% of a firm's cash can be recovered. So that's in Hungary, it's the highest VAT rate. And we're not just looking at travel, we're looking at large expenses, really irrelevant of the industry. Unless you're in financial services, you are paying that, or through your supply chain, or through the business employees that you're sending, you're incurring that VAT. And as Gabrielle will touch on a bit later, talking about import VAT as well. And so when moving goods around the world, is there an opportunity there that money is being spent and unfortunately needs to be recovered? And I think the nice thing as well is, as we're talking, for those of you who haven't actually considered this as part of your business activities, or even thought about where you can manage your cash flow, improve your cash flow and give it a boost, is that in some countries such as the Netherlands, you're able to go back 5 years to recover some of the VAT that was spent. And even internally here in the UK, for those of you who aren't thinking about your travel and entertainment and that expenditure, you can go back 4 years. So there's a big opportunity to boost that cash flow. And it's really something that businesses are thinking about, and where VAT is seen as this very scary element because it can be quite complicated. HMRC likes to think about it as the big let's say enemy for businesses in the room. But honestly, it's something that there is a cash opportunity to be recovered, and you know, that's the work that we do. So from a VAT IT perspective, and just in general, thinking about the foreign opportunity, so that's that international travel, that international spend, domestic, so that's here locally, how do we assist with that? And then from a compliance perspective, for a lot of businesses, it's not just about that money that gets spent on travel or on those supply chain elements. It's making sure that businesses are VAT compliant, not only here in the UK, but if you are selling services into another country, you are staging events, let's say if you're an events management company in those particular countries, what do you need to do? So altogether, that allows businesses to make sure that they don't fall foul with from any VAT authority, and at the end, reducing the compliance risk and increasing the cash flow boost. So very briefly, as a product offering, I mean, I mentioned a lot of it already. The T&E, your travel and entertainment, your hotels, your car rentals, those small things that you and I are always traveling for business purposes and spending that money, whether it's using a company card or whether we're actually spending the money ourselves and then putting it through an expense system. and claiming that back as a reimbursable amount from our employer. And you see how it works, that we spend the money on a card or an expense management system. We spend it with the supplier. We get an invoice. We then submit that invoice to the foreign VAT authority overseas somewhere, German VAT authority, let's say. They then refund the money and we get that money back. So it's a complete loop between spend and the VAT authority and the cash coming back. And then accounts payable, a big one. So there's large supply invoices. So for any businesses that think, I'm staging an event in another country, I am going to a conference, I have an entity in that country and we're purchasing goods from another entity within a particular country and then shipping it back to here to the UK, incurring VAT in that country, and it's a big invoice and you're losing out on money, and now you've got to add price, you've got to add that down to your consumer and to your customer. That's not necessarily always the case. There's a VAT element there, and there's a big possibility that that can be recovered. And that's through the same mechanism as well. So that's on the foreign side. And then, this slide here is, and it probably should have been moved up, probably should have touched on it earlier, but generally the principles of that, it is a consumption tax. So everything that I've spoken about already talks about how the recovery is that input. It's the money spent on goods, on services, on going to hotels, on renting cars, and getting that money back. And whether it's through a VAT return or through this foreign VAT recovery reclaim opportunity, it's money that could be back in the pockets of a business. And really for us, the critical success for any business and any VAT recovery opportunity is understanding the supply chain, making sure that businesses themselves are aware of the VAT opportunities and increasing that ability to recover that VAT, helping businesses with compliance processes, because I think that's really part of the change, understanding what the compliance process is from a VAT perspective, how that feeds into an accounting process as well. So does it allow you, as anyone on this call who are financial controllers working with systems in the finance team, are you able to report on that? And then making sure that that employees, and that's a big part of the work that we do, is work with employees to make sure that invoices and documents are correct. And overall, and I'll stress this a lot, is everything taking all of this into account, VAT recovery works on having the right documentation. So a big part of this is all of us, when we check into hotels, when we conclude transactions through procurement or travel managers, is making sure that the documents, the invoices are correct. So that's the other element of the service, is to train employees to make sure that that's all done. Ultimately, it goes back to otherwise cash gets lost. And of course, none of us as business people want to see that happening from a business perspective. From us as VAT IT, we have 38 offices globally, our head office in London, where we're sitting today, but we're really able to run the gamut across the globe, and that allows us to conduct business, to have a deep, in-depth knowledge of businesses and VAT authorities, even more particular in those different countries. And then I think, very importantly, what's happened since Brexit? How have things changed? Before the official Brexit date, the UK still being part of the EU, sitting inside that EU VAT recovery mechanism. So the way that worked is that the EU would have particular portals, online registrations, online portals where digital copies of invoices could be uploaded. The refund would then be issued, but that would all take place within the EU, and that was called the 8th Directive, one of the EU laws. And there was a deadline for that, which was September each year. So businesses had 9 months from January to September to submit those claims for the prior year. So right now, we would be submitting for transactions for the 2021 year. And what's happened post-Brexit is that that's all changed. So the UK not being part of the EU now, what it means is that there's a bit more paperwork required. There is more opportunity for things to potentially go wrong if businesses are doing it themselves, not collecting the invoices, etc. And essentially, the UK claims, so those UK businesses that are requesting money back from the EU, they have to do that via what's called the 13th Directive. And there are no portals involved in that. So essentially, original invoices or emails showing that invoice was sent by a supplier as a PDF, etc., need to be submitted directly to the tax office. So that's usually through boxes of post or something like that. And original tax certificates showing that you are registered in your particular country. And then you need a few more bits of information on the invoice to make sure that the EU VAT authority, whichever country it is, Hungary, Spain, Poland, France, etc., they're able to understand exactly who you are as a business. Does it make sense? Are you registered, etc.? And you need letters of authority. And what that means is that From our perspective, if we're acting on your behalf, or any reclaim specialist, we need to be able to prove to the VAT authority that you're acting on their behalf. So the big takeaways is that it's more complicated post-Brexit. It's slightly harder now, and it takes slightly more time because you're producing original documentation. And those are the sorts of things that consultants, and we set that up, and we assist businesses with. But it is quite a big change, and unfortunately that does hit the cash flow of businesses. But of course, all changes set up as a challenge, set up with opportunity, and Gabrielle will talk about that as part of the retrade. But that's specifically where opportunity arises, and how businesses can be helped. Just very briefly, we are a member of the International VAT Authority, so from our side, we have that ability and that understanding and that consultation with the different VAT authorities as part of the IVA, and of course, the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce as a strategic EU exit partner, helping businesses within the area, the Greater Cambridgeshire area, navigate through some of the Brexit challenges, and just in general around some of the VAT-related and supply chain queries. So I'm going to hand over to Gabrielle now to look at reciprocity, and then introduce retrade as the service for the supply chain management and the opportunities that we can assist with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to have me today. As Mark suggested, I'm going to do a little bit more kind of into, or kind of focusing the attention more on trading, and where I've seen kind of classic EU pitfalls in the past, and potentially, you know, considerations that businesses should have now when they're trading with the EU. To start off with, this is just something that is really important to highlight, because it kind of ties very nicely into what Mark's been talking about around the VAT element. But the UK, unfortunately, is no longer benefiting from being able to part of the EU, which means that we now have to consider individual agreements with each of the countries within the EU, which can obviously have a knock-on effect in terms of the additional costs that a lot of you will be facing, or will know about now when trading in the EU with the import VAT duties and customs clearance. So this reciprocity, which is the agreement, is something to take into consideration, because it will have the effect. And we just pop into the next slide for me. On to the next slide again. So I think what we wanted to do and what we wanted to highlight here was that, albeit Brexit obviously led to the kind of the prevention of the relationship within the EU, but there are obviously other agreements and free trade agreements that have been put in place with other countries and countries outside of the EU. It's obviously, you know, so easy for us, or previously, to think about trading within the EU, because we did benefit from the fact that we were all part of one union. But it's probably, you know, quite interesting, or a new fact to know that we've actually got several other free trade agreements in place with other countries and other jurisdictions around the world, and that can see, you know, a lot of other benefits when trading with those, and it can lead to in excess of £850 billion worth of trade, they believe. So 60 other countries and all of the EU 27, we do have free trade agreements aligned with, and they all unfortunately have several pages and several lengths of notes on what all of those are. But if you are thinking about potentially increasing trading with other countries and other destinations, it's definitely something to keep in mind, that these are all applicable. So I wanted to now just take some time really to go over some of the general problem areas that we've seen in our experience. Clients have come up against now that they are trading or trying to continue trading within the EU. A lot of clients are not understanding the Incoterms, and namely not linking the Incoterms to the ownership and the actual sale of the goods. So an Incoterm is specifically defined as whose responsibility it is to move a good from A to B. And it's up to the kind of people involved in the actual transaction to make sure that those Incoterms align with the actual sale of goods, because they're two different things. And that can obviously lead to the prevention of you not being able to claim import VAT, or your clients not being able to claim import VAT if documents are incorrect. I think it's really, really important that companies do the research and do the information gathering on what goods they have, finding the right HS code, assuring that the commodity code is correct, and checking those against the EU database. This could lead to, several things around requirements for export licenses, POAs needing to be signed, veterinary certificates needing to be confirmed. And this is all going to determine whether goods are dutiable in the EU. And making sure that they are correct can obviously mean that goods getting through at the border can be a lot more efficient, a lot more seamless, and it can reduce the amount of audit that you may be facing, or delays, or many other things. Documents being correct and having accurate data is something that is so essential. So making sure that your information on the commercial invoice, on the packing list, on everything is within legislation of the country that it's being sent to. Everything is being clearly stated on there is so important from an export declaration point of view as well. And ensuring that you have considered things like preferential origin or inserting preferential statements, making sure that the goods comply with the EU within each of those jurisdictions as well, something that all companies need to start thinking about when they're trading within the EU. So a couple more things I think that have kind of come to mind when thinking about clients that we've worked with or have tried to assist in recovery purposes is understanding their supply chain. Something that might have seemed so simple, and there was one way of doing it across all 27 EU countries beforehand, is something now that needs to be considered on an individual basis. So businesses are having to navigate multiple different customs regimes, understanding the VAT requirements per jurisdiction, and understanding legislation within each of the countries. So, just because you've imported one, product under one HS code and one source of fashion with the documents you require in, say, Germany, doesn't mean that that's going to be the same way that you ship goods or the same documents that you require for France. So unfortunately, off the back of Brexit, we now, as a UK kind of business, have to consider how we trade with each individual EU to ensure that the legislation within each country is met on the goods that are shipped. I think making sure that you are partnered with like a reputable customs broker, a logistics provider that you can count on, that you trust. Ultimately, with all of these things, I know, unfortunately, that as with anything, cash is king at the end of the day, and a lot of it will come down to the fact of cost and price, because that really is going to affect the margin. But having a provider that you can count on, that you trust, and has a good reputation is only ever going to make you feel more comfortable when you're shipping things, and make you feel more aligned, I guess, with what they are more aligned with what you're trying to achieve. Being able to build a good, solid relationship with providers is only ever going to put you in a better position ultimately, because you can really kind of communicate what you're trying to achieve, what you want to happen, what the goods are, what documents are required. And it means that when your goods actually hitting the border in the foreign country or in the other jurisdiction, you can rely on someone who understands what you're trying to achieve to clear those goods through for you. So I think having a bit of a look at the people that you're working with can be something really, really key to improving trade and making things seem a lot more seamless than they are. We just wanted to talk through, just very high level, an example of the continued changes that we're finding when now dealing with the EU and different VAT regimes. And I know that there's been a lot of questions from the people that I work with around changes within the VAT law. And from the 1st of January 2022, France has now added a change or an amendment to its VAT regime, which will be affecting or should have been affecting all businesses that are now importing goods into France from a non-EU country. So everyone that is correctly displayed or correctly importing the goods as a non-EU business will require a French VAT registration to move those goods into the EU. What this also means is that import VAT into France will no longer be taken at the border, and it will be automatically accounted for under the importer of record's French VAT number. So therefore, there will be no kind of cash outflow of the import VAT when trading into the EU if you are correctly assigned as the importer of record. So for your business, if you are doing this, you need to consider, am I the importer of record? Am I being correctly displayed as the importer of record? Do I require a valid VAT number? Do I require fiscal representation in France? And am I being, am I paying import VAT when I should potentially be deferring it? So these are all different things. These are all different considerations that businesses need to have. And I think this just highlights to you how often the landscape is changing, how much, the different countries now they have the ability to change things. And we are impacted on an individual basis rather than on the whole as dealing with the whole of the EU. So I've just popped a few considerations high level that I always ask my clients to consider, when they're shipping and when they're dealing with customers. Are you facing customs clearance challenges? Who are the brokers doing it? Going back to, do you trust them? Do you have a long-standing relationship with them? Is there difficulties when dealing with them? What Incoterms am I using and what are the best for what I need to do? Do I need an importer of record service? Who is the importer of record? Am I being correctly represented at customs? Are my documents correct? Have you checked them? Do you understand what the documents are even showing you? These are all questions you need to start thinking about. Is there a VAT requirement needed? Now with the changes in France, for example, are you bringing goods into France and are you paying that import VAT, maybe not deferring it or not claiming it back? And the key, I think, is to understand the obligations to trade within the EU with a minimal disruption. Is that something that we can do now? Are you considering everything? So, as Mark suggested, as a company, we do offer the ability to potentially have a high-level conversation with us on anything that you might have queries with. Hopefully, we can provide the answers and insights or point you in the right direction. But from a trading perspective, thank you so much for joining the call, and hopefully we've given you some insights in terms of the VAT ecosystem and landscape, but also what some things that you should be considering if you are moving goods or if you are trading into the EU. Thank you so much.
Lovely, thanks guys. So obviously we'll get some questions going on this as well. I apologise to anyone that had trouble getting in and has been late to the party, as it were. We seem to have had an issue with some of the links that were sent out, so I do apologise. So in short, we at the Chamber obviously have been working with you guys for a while now, and if we have somebody come to us with some complex VAT information that we aren't able to assist them with personally, or we can't direct them to a simple outcome, it's important to stress, right, that you guys literally have a support desk where you offer consultancy diagnostic calls. It's not always initially going to be a chargeable thing. You'll pick up the phone, you'll help where you can, and if it's needed to go into a more in-depth, then that's where your consultation and services sort of really up their game, and you can help people both in the UK and across the borders. You've got that ability. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think thinking about the different services that we offer, the consultation on VAT generally, then the recovery, that reclaim opportunity that I spoke about, Gabrielle mentioning now the cross-border trade, the supply chain, within those, we work on a variety of charging mechanisms. We're always happy to have that conversation. Obviously, with the Cambridgeshire members, we'll talk, have a conversation, understand what's needed, and then if that becomes something later on, we'll engage. And I think the benefit of us having those offices all over the world allows us to understand exactly what those VAT authorities or the customs border authorities require, and that's really what we've been able to build. And I think in our history and experience, we've learned that you can't just answer one part of the question. You need to be able to offer that assistance all the way through. So we're very happy to be able to do that for your members and everyone here today.
Perfect. So if anyone's got any questions that they want to sort of pose to the team while they're here live, please sort of put your hand up, and we'll sort of have a look at what you've got. I know that one of our members is on the call today, Julia, and she did have quite an anomaly which we did put towards you. So if I just give you the brief on it. They had an import coming in from Germany under DAP Incoterms, and obviously the UK importer is responsible for the import clearance on that basis. But the freight forwarder from the EU actually raised the documents in their name without their permissions, and in doing so inadvertently put in a completely incorrect sum of money, because it was a sum of money for the sale between the EU and the EU, not the EU and the UK. So the invoice amount that was declared calculated an incorrect amount of VAT for the UK. Where do they stand on that? I mean, who's able to assist them in that kind of error and with that kind of legality? Is there a specific regime that they need to go through for the EU?
No, there's not a specific regime per se. When it comes to miscalculated VAT and having that exposure of incorrect VAT being charged, there's the ability to get that amended through kind of HMRC, in terms of it, when we look at the service offerings from VAT customs authority, HMRC is quite well equipped in the sense of it has a lot of information on there. Sometimes it is hard to decipher what is relevant to a specific scenario. But for this specific one, there is the ability to amend things. I think there's a form, I can't remember off the top of my head, that potentially needs to be completed, but it might be a case, and I have spoken to Julia. I think we're going to speak in more on this tomorrow about it, but yep, there is the ability to potentially amend. But again, it goes back to my point about the understanding the contract with the actual supplier. Like, what have they agreed to in terms of who is doing what? Just because an Incoterm is specified or used does not mean that ties into the actual contractual obligation between the two parties involved. And that's why it's important to consider everything, because as Julie's experience, it's likely that something will have just been raised from an ERP and just added into the commercial invoice, and there's a differing amount because there's clearly another transaction that's gone on in the background. So it is just a case of flagging these things when they happen, making sure that you understand the terms that you've agreed to and understand exactly what the difference is between your contract and the Incoterms.
Excellent. But it raises the point as well, sort of like the point that we keep trying to stress as customs agents, the importance of ensuring that whoever's lodging your customs declarations is providing you with a copy of that valid entry report showing the amount of VAT that's been calculated for the UK specifically, because that's what our importers are liable for.
Of course. And I mean, look, again, I'm not trying to toot the UK's horn or anything, but they have a brilliant way of you receiving those import declarations. It's automated, it's easy. You should be able to download those, and it should be something that you should get through. Look, I'm not going to say it's super easy, because there is a level of compliance that needs to happen. You need to make sure that everything is linked, is all pulling through. There is the reconciliation associated, of course. you've got to do what Julia does. You've got to make sure that you're checking that. Is every business doing that? I don't know. You tell me. I would imagine not, but that is a really important part of it. So it's brilliant to hear that Julia is doing those checks on everything. I would say that, back to your point on getting the declaration, that is so important. If you're importing or, being displayed on a document that's declaring that you bought goods into a certain country, you need to know. But going back to your point on, should they be getting it for every single time? This is why it's important to know what you're doing with suppliers all the time, because if you're moving something and you're consigning accidentally someone's name onto those documents legally on a piece of paper, they're then to be seen bringing the goods in. So they therefore have a right to see those declarations and you don't, but they also have a right to know that they're importing those goods. So this is where imports, exports, trading, it can become very complex. It can become very risky. And yeah, it's a delicate matter, to say the least.
Yeah, we're all finding out the hard way, I believe. Patrice, you've got a question, I believe. So far away.
Yes. Basically, it's about triangulation. We are buying, it is a projection screen, that we are buying it from Italy and selling it to France. And we would like to avoid shipping it to UK and then back to France. Would it be possible to ship it directly from Italy to France without having registered a VAT number in both countries?
I don't like getting into the specifics of triangulation because it's so complicated, and each transaction is unique to the certain set of terms that is agreed, between the two suppliers. High level, there is potentially, and I stress on the words potentially, the ability to maybe get one VAT registration. But if you are taking ownership of goods in the EU and you are then distributing those goods and making an intra-community movement of some description, and a business is acquiring those goods, then the authorities will want to know about that. And unfortunately, that means that there will have to be some form of submission, filing, declarant that is being done. We can no longer benefit from the simplified triangulation that we once were able to, because we were part of the EU. We are now seen as non-EU, and therefore we need to take the relevant steps in terms of compliance to make sure we can do those transactions. Otherwise, you risk exposing yourself to massive penalties and fines, and yeah, it can be quite daunting at times.
Gabrielle, Patrice, if I could jump in there as well. We did, I recall, a webinar on our triangulation. Well, one of our experts specifically around triangulation, and the thing that stuck in my mind is, as Gabrielle just said, is that because we're not part of the EU, that sort of simplification does fall away. I think it might be worth us engaging offline and just to understand that specific set of circumstances, and whether we can, there's an opportunity to offer some form of structure that avoids any level of multiple registration, and we can address that. But that, yeah, overall, I think that's the one of the things that Brexit just caused. So the UK just cannot take advantage of it, and they don't seem to have put together a replacement just yet, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you. There's another question from Sandra asking, if they're shipping to France but invoicing a UK company, what are the VAT implications on that?
So again, this is likely, determined by what the goods are, what the Incoterms are, what the contractual agreements are. But obviously, technically a domestic sale is happening, so there would be potentially a UK VAT obligation there. But the actual physical movement, that could also raise some form of VAT obligation, because VAT doesn't only follow the sale, it follows the physical movement of goods, and goods are being moved from the UK and they're being moved to France. So it's difficult for me to say where ownership moves, who takes ownership of the goods, but yeah, it could bring up, multiple different obligations. So I wouldn't like to say off the top of my head what that is going to be, in terms
of very much dependent on the Incoterm on that kind of basis.
Incoterm, it's not just Incoterm, it's ownership, contracts, everything. We have to think about it. Is there a service being offered? as well? Is there installation of some description? Are they, you know, are the goods being rented? There's so many different things that need to be considered.
Okay, that's handy. And another question, is IPR the only way to handle warranty returns from Europe to UK for repair? So the inward processor relief, that's slightly different to sort of obviously the VAT element of things.
Correct.
In the sense that it's a different procedure code on your customs declaration.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Perfect.
Yeah. So on that, Joe, we can discuss IPR procedures and bits and pieces if you want to drop us an email at the chamber. You know, there's plenty of information available, and we can go through that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and Irina, thank you. So she's answering Sandra's earlier question with regards to the shipping to France, but invoicing in the UK. Irina's saying yes, there are obligations to the mandatory FRPVA from the 1st of January. So the France postponed VAT, which we touched on about the French authority VAT requirement now.
Yeah, I would just be careful with that though, because it's not like, you know, a simple UK to France. It's only applicable if the goods are being imported in the UK's name, that there could be a potential requirement for the VAT registration. But again, you know, I wouldn't like to say without understanding all of the details of the structure of the
no. So again, presumably it would go down to who's going to be the exporter of record from the UK as well, because if that's going to be Sandra and her company, although she's selling to the UK, if they're shipping and they're putting themselves as the exporter of record, then the implications of the VAT go to them. But if
again, I mean, maybe not like 100%, because obviously that's determined. You can be the exporter of record, but you don't have to be the importer of record. It is just a case of what the transaction looks like, because there's obviously 2 UK parties, but then there's a delivery into France. So it would just be untangling, you know, what's going on in the background, a lot of different things that we would have to consider. So yeah.
Of course. So you know, again, people can sort of pick up the phone to you on your consultancy line and bits and pieces and go through that kind of scenario for specifics on that basis. So we haven't got any other questions. So does anybody else have anything else that they would like to put to the team on any of these points at all before we sort of, you know, look to wind things down? Okay, there's another one just popped in. So if we start shipping on DDP to France rather than DAP, does that have a VAT implication or change?
Not necessarily.
It's the minefield of Incoterms.
Yeah, it's literally like, it literally is. So DDP means delivered duties paid, which means that you as the buyer, seller are responsible for paying the duties, the import VAT, etc., etc. So if you are just saying, you know, I'm going to pay all of those, but you are not being the importer at the point of France, you know, importing into France, then nothing's going to change. But if you are becoming the importer, that's when you know, that's when it's changing, because you are paying it, you want to claim it back, but you want to correctly be, you know, displayed on the document. You are therefore importing goods into France, and that is when the obligations will start to take shape a bit more.
Fantastic, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so I don't know that we've got any other questions come in. So I would like to thank you guys for your time and obviously your knowledge and information. It's been a great help. Obviously, everyone can see the copy of your contact and you can access that if you're members to the Cambridgeshire Chamber. We have a specific link in our member website as well. If you're not members, contact us and we can sort of point you in the right direction for that. We will send out a copy of the slides as well. Just to those participants that have registered, just so as you've got something that you can transfer any notes that you've made from Mark and Gabrielle's conversations. onto those slides, and they might make a little bit more sense at a later time. If you're anything like me, you have notes and you don't know what the question was because you're busy scribbling. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, and we'll sign off and leave you there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
for
Thanks,
having
Karen.
us.
Thanks
Thanks
all.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.